Hey, it's Tom Newton with Great Games for Golf. Welcome to my first live interview with a great contributor to the game of golf. Donnie Dotson is the founder and CEO of Carry.golf, an exciting new investment company. Carry.golf raises capital from fan investors for early stage pro golfers who need funding to make their way to the top tours. The program provides a platform for community members to share in the journeys of the pros, including private tournament updates, golf retreats, and pro-ams. It's kind of like getting a chance to be inside the ropes. Carry golfers share a percentage of their earnings from qualified events with the fan investor community. My interview with Donnie's a little bit long, but it's worth it because there's so much to tell. I think you'll find it fascinating. I know I did. There we go. I haven't done the recording before, so I'm pretty sure I was going to screw it up.
Yeah, no, it's live now. I don't know if you heard it on your end, but the voice of God comes over and says recording in progress.
Warning all attendees. No, that's good. Well, let's just jump right in. I'm not a professional interviewer, so this is really going to be more of a conversation. And I thought I might just kind of start out with how this even came about. And
Sure.
it's funny because somewhere I saw on social media about Carry Golf, and I read a little bit about it, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And I remembered a really good friend of mine, Steve Melrose. He's Ben Crane's stepdad,
Okay.
and he used to tell us about how the members at Portland Golf Club all got together and funded Ben early in his career. And so I was kind of aware of how, up and coming golfers need financial support and to try to get into it. And then when I read about you and your new organization, I thought that's a great idea. And so I'm like an impulsive person. I do things, because they look fun and then I'll figure it out later. And
Sure.
there was a reasonable minimum investment. I thought, well, I'm just going to do it and then see what this is all about. So I filled out the application and the criteria, and then one night you call me. I don't know if you remember that, but
Of course.
you were getting down to the last, somehow I hadn't given you something you needed. You needed my driver's license or something, I think, to finalize the proof that I was an eligible investor. And
Sure.
I knew you were under the gun, but you started chatting with me, and we had a really fun conversation. And then I got this idea. Oh gosh, wouldn't it be fun to get Donnie on my blog thing and share? I just, it's a cool idea, and I want to share it with people. And I've been trying to put it in my newsletter and on the website and stuff. And you were kind enough to say you'd do an interview, or a casual conversation, I think we should call it. But
Yeah, I'm definitely not a professional interviewee either, so casual conversation works well for me.
awesome. Well, let's just jump in and hear about you instead of me. A little bit about your background, and then how this kind of came to be.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit of a winding road, but my professional background kind of began in the national security space. I was a Marine straight out of high school, and really that was because in 1999 I wasn't nearly as good of a high school wide receiver as I thought I was. And when bigger opportunities to play in college weren't going to materialize, and I didn't share kind of the same enthusiasm as my peers for for going to the local state schools in Florida. On a bit of a whim, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. Speaking of impulsive behavior, it's probably the most impulsive thing I've done to date, and it was certainly a pivotal part of my life story. Short of marrying my wife, it's the best thing I've ever done for myself. We definitely wouldn't be having this conversation were it not for my time in the Marines. But I enlisted in '99. I got out in 2003. Um, the midpoint of my 4 years was essentially 9/11, almost to the day. And I can tell you that the 2 years on both sides were a very different experience.
Wow.
The first 2 years, it felt like the Marine Corps was a fun, tough sleepaway camp where we got to drink some beers on the weekends with our buddies. And then September 11th happened, and it really kind of put put a fine print on why we have a military and certainly our role and responsibility. In those following 2 years, I spent multiple deployments to the Middle East, culminating with the invasion of Iraq. And I returned home thinking the war was over. Everyone was getting out of the service, and so I went to school on the GI Bill. As we saw play out while I was in college, and certainly as we appreciated the time, not knowing how long those wars would continue on, but as we saw play out, I think it became pretty apparent we were going to be in the Middle East for some time to come. And it was the only place in my travels with the Marine Corps, and I was fortunate to travel quite a bit. The Middle East region was the only place where I felt really just kind of um, out of touch culturally, just uninformed as someone who was new to a culture. And so I studied Arabic primarily in college. After graduating, I went back to work for the government as a human intelligence officer, where I was trained by CIA to find, recruit, and handle intelligence sources on behalf of the U.S. government. Absolutely love that job. I got to travel the world again, meet with and work with some fascinating people, and do something which I thought had a real, kind of higher gravity cause, trying to keep fellow Americans and other people safe and secure. But I got married in 2012, and priorities started slowly shift. My wife came overseas with me, but the realities of kind of disappearing for a few weeks on end, completely out of pocket, weren't the same now that I was married and had other responsibilities. So I left the government, went to business school at Duke, came out working in finance at Goldman Sachs, and that was great because that was my first time in the private sector whatsoever, and I got a great seat in New York to kind of learn about all the different industries and sectors that were out there and kind of broader commerce. Um, but I knew that wasn't where I was going to be for long. I always wanted to work in sports. Even though my athletic career peaked long ago in high school, like the biggest interest for mine personally has always been in and around sports. And so I had a chance in January of 2020 to join a company called Sport Radar. Sport Radar is in the business of collecting and distributing live sports data from events all around the world. And they were making a big push to grow. This is even before they went public. They were making a big push to grow in the United States. So I had a chance. I joined them almost February 1st, 2020. And then 6 weeks later, live sports went away. And I found myself thinking, shoot, I just left Goldman Sachs. I've got a wife and kids now. And here I am at this, private sports company. To the best of my knowledge, all of their revenue comes from live sports, of which there is none right now. And just through a little bit of luck and initiative, I ended up working for the U.S. CEO and the global CEO and founder, as well as some other corporate development folks, on this kind of crisis M&A team. Hey, COVID is impacting sports worldwide. What's going to be the inevitable outcome? How do businesses and entities come out stronger? And for me, it was kind of like a fifth year or third year of business school where I got to learn a lot more about um, the economics of sports, how leagues make money, how teams make money, and certainly how individual athletes not only make money but finance their careers. And this is where I came to discover this world of, wow, I love golf, but on a good day, I'm a 11, 12 handicap. I never played competitively. I didn't realize what the process was of going from being a good college player or amateur player to making the top tours in the world. And this is where I came to realize there are a lot of folks out there, to your point about Ben Crane, who are trying to make it, who have all the game and work ethic and intangibles in the world. But if you don't have the money to enter tournaments, to travel to events, to hire caddies or coaches, you're certainly competing with one arm tied behind your back. And so as someone who loves golf, as someone who appreciates the importance of capital, right? If it wasn't for the GI Bill, I could have never afforded college. If it wasn't for people going out of their way in different parts of my life to invest in me, maybe not always financially, but certainly as a mentor or as a friend. If it wasn't for that, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And so I thought, wow, it'd be really cool as just as someone who's a fan first, if we could put together some kind of vehicle that would help athletes with their funding and maybe bring, weekend hackers like you and I closer to the game, hopefully learn something in the process. And so we got started, really in earnest about 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago. My wife was true champion of what we're doing, and I've certainly been the breadwinner. And we said, well, let's go test this idea. And so I did a 6 week incubator through this company called Tacklebox, and it's really all about, hey, before you start a new business or before you leave your job and start a business, do this course first and figure out if it makes sense. Well, I had left Sport Radar from a standpoint of, I had a broad mandate there in and around sports. I just wanted kind of a clean separation if I was going to do this. And I've always been someone to kind of dive headfirst into it. And so I did this incubator, and the premise was all about get to know your potential customers, which seems, in hindsight, pretty basic, pretty elementary.
Right.
But I think there are a lot of companies out there, and certainly I would have done the same, that get started by they start building a product, they fancy website, investor decks, and they've never really spoken to a customer. And what I love about Tacklebox is they really put the emphasis on talk to as many customers as you possibly can. And it was great. And the first thing I did after our first session was email all of my friends, acquaintances from business school, from Goldman, people who I knew loved golf and had a little bit of disposable income. And I said, hey, there's this whole reality of professional golfers or kind of the minor leagues of pro golf, players who are trying to make it, and they have to kind of get creative about how they finance their careers. Many of them work part-time jobs. Others are fortunate to be able to raise some kind of starter funds from their local club, and then others agree to these private loans or debt deals, which are very much not in their best interest, but it's the only way they can stay in the game. And so I kind of pitched this to people in an email, and I said, that all being said, I've never spoken with a single professional golfer to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Do any of you know somebody? And I probably sent this to a couple hundred people, and I was fortunate to get a handful of responses like, "Oh yeah, my cousin played on the tour for a while," or my brother or sister tried making it. One thing snowballed into another, and at this point, I stopped keeping track of all the different pros or former pros that I've spoken with, but it's definitely over 1,000. And the interesting thing there is when you talk to them, the story is pretty consistent, unless they came from a very affluent personal situation, or had some other funding, or they're uniquely marketable, like the Ricky Fowlers of the world. Most players will tell you, you graduate college or you leave college and you turn pro, and your first order of business is fundraising. Um, I don't know about you at 23, 24, 25. If you told me you had to go pitch individuals to raise funds for a career, I wouldn't have known where to start or how to do it. Certainly wouldn't have had the network for it. So that's fascinating. And you start hearing some of these pain points, and for me, once I would have a conversation, inevitably I would start following these players on their different tours or different events. And I didn't know them, any better than I know you, right? Through a couple conversations and a Zoom. But I became emotionally invested, especially when you see them having some success. It's like, wow, I don't care what the course setup is. A 64, that's real golf,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I knew there was something there, and certainly at this time, like you can go online and you can research the world of sugar daddies or sugar mamas in golf, or all these different scenarios. Tony Finau was very much in the news for a situation with someone who invested in his career, or provide him some financial support. And so there was a bunch of literature out there, but I also didn't know, okay, well, how does this work on the other side of the market, right? The people who actually want to support them. And so I sent a follow-on email to much of those same people, and I said, great, appreciate all the help. I've talked to a lot of golfers. There's clearly a need for some kind of product or service out there to help them with the funding. Um, but what I need to figure out is, do people really want to, give up their own income? to support someone's career. And what came up time and time again in talking with people that were self-professed golf nuts or golf junkies is, Donnie, I totally get it. This sounds really cool. I would love to kind of live vicariously through a young pro or a group of young pros. Um, but I see some of the things that are out there on GoFundMe, right? Some of the players that start a GoFundMe page, and I think that's great as a sign of like their commitment, entrepreneurial initiative. But when I see those campaigns, juxtaposed with campaigns for other things like the current events, the fires in Maui or something.
Yeah.
When I see those two things side by side, my charity dollars are always going to be inclined to go to, you know, again, the fires in Maui type example, and totally can empathize with that. So we said, well, what if we build a vehicle where, in addition to supporting them financially, there's some experiential engagement. We get together for events. You kind of can read these private updates and feel like you're getting inside the rope type access. And they said, yeah, that sounds great. But if someone goes on to really make it big, I need to know there's a chance I can get my money back or maybe even generate a return. And so with that, that led to us creating kind of the backbone of our model, an investment product called the contingent agreement for shared earnings. And it's very much set up so that on the front end, we'll provide as much funding and support as we can. If there's ways we can support beyond funding, great. But how can we be a vehicle to provide that seed capital for these golfers? And just like any private business out there, if they go on to tremendous success and make it, then how can those initial backers participate in the upside and do so from a standpoint of, you're not going to get rich on it, but okay, I made some money on this. Now let me back the next group of golfers or do whatever they will with it.
Let me ask
Um,
you, Donnie.
that was the starting point. A long answer to a short question.
No, that's great. I just wanted to one little question in there. At this point in your journey, was that all you were doing, or did you have other
No,
occupations?
yeah. So I had left Sport Radar, and it was I was a few months or a couple months into this business discovery, and I was obsessed with this, right? And in addition to being a dad and husband, this was my vocation. And looking back, I like to think that we would have signed up for the same experience, all the highs and lows that have come with trying to start a business. But I didn't anticipate, hey, 2.5 years down the road, I would be kind of, um, I don't know what I anticipated. I shouldn't say that, but it was definitely a gamble, and it was one that I was doing full time early on. And so as we moved from that research and kind of what would be a product that would resonate with both sides of the audience there, right? Your golfers and people who would want to invest in their careers. We said, all right, well, we need some funds to support these golfers because there is I mentioned a body of literature out there. There is just this very real world of golfers who have been promised X by a backer or sponsor, whatever term you want to use, only for said sponsor or backer to not deliver, or even worse, try to pull one over on these young pros. And so we were entering the market as a brand new company, had a business card and a crappy website as our only bona fides, right? And then just before we started like really moving forward with some golfers, there was a tournament, and there's plenty of press out there about this event, but there was a tournament called the Big Money Classic, which was held in December of 21. And it was billed as a professional golf tournament, not aligned with any of the tours, but unlike some of the mini tours where the purse kind of is capped and the winner isn't necessarily gonna make a lot of money. I forget what the purse was structured at for this Big Money Classic, but the winner was going to get $100,000, that's a big payday for anyone. And it's December in Florida; most pros are on their off season, so they had a good mix of players sign up. And what ended up playing out, and I don't want to get into the details of it. What ended up playing out is the players who won or who finished in the money either didn't receive the money they were promised, or it took a long time for them to get it. And I don't even know where it stands now from a legal standpoint. But this was an entity that I think, to my knowledge, was created from a standpoint of they wanted to help pros kind of in this developmental tour space. Only the execution and how it ultimately played out went awry. And so I said, all right, with that as like the background, what we need to do first is we need to raise some funds and then go out and find some golfers and test this idea. But two things. One, does the upfront capital have a meaningful impact on their performance, even in a small sample size of one season? Does that help? And two, do fans of the game who invest in this company, do fans of the game get excited about following along with players who are playing on tours or in tournaments they may not be familiar with, that they may not be able to see on TV? Do they enjoy the chance to get together and break some bread and play some golf like we did in Pinehurst? And so I raised some funds in early 2022 privately, for the managing entity called Carry Athlete Investing Incorporated. It's a C Corp. Raised some funds, and then we went out and we found 9 golfers to start with. Good mix of men and women from all over the U.S., very different tours, impressive backgrounds. And we said, all right, let's start with these golfers. And they all got over the course of a season a little more than $50,000. And again, we said, is this going to make an impact on their performance? And two, do people get excited about following along? And in the first instance, I'll say candidly, kind of had some mixed results, right? Some players improved in status, other players either regressed or kind of finished, neutral on the year. I think there was a bit of learning, not only for the players, but certainly myself, that when you go from maybe having a 10 tournament a year schedule to all of a sudden you're playing 20, 25 events, maybe there's some physical, mental, emotional wear and tear there. And so how can you kind of space that out? That was a helpful learning exercise. But then on the second side, on the second data point, we had a lot of people sign up on our wait list that we had ongoing or reach out saying, oh, this is really cool. I would love to invest in golfers. When can you make this available at a, publicly at a lower price point? And so that brings us to where we are in 2023. We said there's enough evidence here to push forward from a business case standpoint. Let's go out and let's pick 10 players this time. Ideally 5 men, 5 women, but we weren't married to any kind of composite. Let's go out and pick 10 players through our own process. And then let's go live with the campaign and let's see if all these people who signed up on our wait list and otherwise now, if given an opportunity that's, SEC approved or regulated, above board, easy to track, if people will actually invest in golfers, where our model is less about the economics and more about the experience, supporting players, being part of something cool. And yeah, if they make it, have some skin in the game.
Donnie, how do you pick the players? What is your criteria?
Yeah, and I would say that's evolving. As I get into kind of the future version of the business, hopefully it's less about us picking players, and I'll share more about that. But for this group, we prioritized a handful of criteria that were based on conversations with some of the best teaching pros in the country, agents, scouts, tour players on both the men's and women's side. And what's interesting, just kind of as an aside, if you, in my experience, if you sit down with a handful of tour pros, and you say, like, what's the most important attribute or data point you look at, and what's the most important attribute for someone going from a great amateur or collegiate career to being a pro? If you've got 20 pros in the room, you're not going to get 20 different answers, but you're going to get a lot more different answers than you think. It isn't just, especially on the men's side, it isn't just, well, ball speed trumps everything else, or, greens and regulation or par 5 scoring. Who you speak with, I think there's a little bit of like self bias and their own game kind of comes out. But one thing that we saw across the board was there were some different inputs and different data points to prioritize. Probably the most consistent theme we heard was you got to find people that are mentally tough, who believe they can win, right? And I think mental toughness probably applies to every job or industry on the planet, but I can certainly appreciate how when you're coming down the back nine of a tournament where you have a chance to win and make some life-changing money, how being strong between the ears matters. So
You
in
know, I
addition to,
interrupt you here for a second. I just
yeah,
listened to an interview with Podrick Harrington, and
okay,
he said the guys at the top are not necessarily any better ball strikers or any better putters. They're the guys that can control their minds.
I believe it.
I think that's really true.
I believe it. You know, Patty's always he's always a great listen. I listen to him in different podcasts or see him on videos. He seems to do a great job of just boiling down the game for all of its complexities in a very simple way, even again for people like myself. And I would say that's probably echoed by most pros, certainly the ones I've spoken with. And so, in addition to different criteria, we looked at their college track record to the extent that stats and data are available at this level of golf. We certainly leveraged that, and those came from a variety of sources. Um, we wanted people that had done some winning at any level, right? They've proven the ability to win, whether that was as a junior, amateur player, collegiate, certainly early stage pro. There's an element of just the good human factor because our model leans into a lot of, hey, let's get our golfers and investors together for our retreat in Pinehurst, or like we're doing in Streamsong in January. And you want people that are going to be able to say, hey, Tom, thanks for all the support, thanks for coming out and checking out what we're doing, and engage you in a way that maybe you learn something about golf, maybe you learn something about your own swing that day, but you have fun. And I think that within the world of golf, uh, you know, finding people that would be a good fit. There are certainly many of them, but that was part of our selection process. And then, we wanted people that had that winner's mindset. So we had all of our golfers go through an interview with a mental performance coach, and it was really built around this idea of, let's say 2023 or 2024 doesn't go how you anticipate. You struggle or you get injured or whatever. You don't have the results you'd like to see. Where are you mentally? Where are you as it relates to being a professional golfer? And we wanted people that would say, like, I don't care if 23 is my worst year ever or if 24 doesn't go well. I'm going to make the PGA Tour, or I'm going to make the LPGA Tour because that's what I'm supposed to be doing, and that's what I believe I can do. And if I don't have success this year, I'll find a way to make it happen. And most players were like that. We did have some say like, hey, if it doesn't work out, then maybe I'll go do something else. Which I certainly admire the sincerity and transparency there, but you could understand for our model how that would be a bit of a flag.
Right.
Um, and there was a few other different kind of data points we looked at. Ultimately, and maybe you're going there, but ultimately, I don't want to be in the business of selecting golfers to help fund every year or every few years. I will tell you professionally, it was probably one of the more
Mm.
challenging and stressful processes I've ever been part of. We had 200 applicants come in about 11, 12 days when we launched our application last September. And I would say conservatively, you could look at 125 and say, yeah, I can see clearly with the right timing, resources, perhaps a little bit of luck, how these players could go on to success. Right. We had some
But how
players in
will you
there.
pick them then
What's that? Yeah.
if you're not
So
going to
with
pick
that,
them?
and with that process, we shut the application off. We turned it off because from a bandwidth standpoint, I couldn't handle any more of it. Our selection committee, which was made up of some of my investors, agents, coaches, tour players, to kind of emphasize how hard the process was. Out of the group that we selected, I don't think there was a single one that was a unanimous decision. And out of our pool of 20, 25 finalists, there wasn't there wasn't a single one that didn't get votes either, right? Like everyone was, it was really tough to kind of make sense of who you want to be part of this group. Going forward, my vision for Carry is I just want to be the platform for golfers, perhaps other athletes to come on and say, "Hey, I'm Tom. I'm trying to make the PGA Tour, or I'm trying to make, this level of my sport, but it's really expensive on the front end. Uh, I'm raising funds. Will you invest in my career? Carry will help facilitate events, a sense of community. You can be part of my team." But if you think about all these athletes from a standpoint of they are their own private business, right? Like most of them have created their own LLC or business entity for their career. If you think about it like that, to me, it's perplexing why there isn't some platform out there that is above board, that is legit, that allows people to invest in their careers in the same way. I mean, I know this since founding Carry, there's a really robust and mature ecosystem out there for businesses seeking capital, right? Whether it's debt or equity or grants, small business loans through the SBA. There's a whole infrastructure out there that I can go access capital. But if I'm a golfer in a business that has a caddy and a coach and other people to have on my payroll, I don't have that same kind of ecosystem. So I want to be the platform provider where people know, you know, what they're investing in, who they're investing in, that it is done the right way in according with regulations. And in that scenario, it's really just come one, come all. We'll provide our own baseline due diligence to make sure, Tom submitted an application. He really is a professional golfer. He's not just playing the occasional mini tour or state open. Um, but in that scenario, it's open to kind of efficient markets, right? And I think based on my interviews with customers to date and potential customers, you'll have players and athletes that get supported or get invested in for a variety of quantitative reasons, for a variety of qualitative reasons. And a lot of our job will just be kind of amplifying their story, their ask, and their campaign.
That's awesome. So let's say somebody sees my interview with you here and wants to get involved. How do they how do they best do it?
Yeah, our website is carry.golf, carry.golf. Best way to go and check out what we're all about. We do have a current crowdfunding campaign for our 2023 cohort of golfers, which is again the 5 men, 5 women. That campaign is going to end on September 15th. So if you want to invest in the careers of these golfers, the minimum starting or minimum price to do so is $250. And then it goes up in $50 increments from there. But you invest for $250. We've created an LLC, which is the Carry Golf Club. That's the kind of second entity. Um, and you invest in the Carry Golf Club. One of the cash flows is a percentage of the future earnings of these golfers whenever they compete in tournaments where the purse is 1.5 million or greater. So again, if you want to invest in golfers, you can do so. Carry.golf now through September 15th, $250. It takes about 5 minutes on our site to fill out the paperwork and submit your credit card or bank information. And then you're part of our community, which is approaching 350 people. And it's a lot of fun.
So then are you invested in that golfer for their whole career or just
For yeah, for this LLC, we did one season of funding for 4 years. So you're invested in the golfers through 2027. A big part of our model is based on, I think I kind of alluded to it earlier. Um, in the world of funding or backing golfers, you kind of have two flavors of ice cream. One much better from a golfer perspective. You have the members at a club or people who have taken a liking to a pro and they say, "Hey Tom, I really like you and your game and believe in you. Here's some money, like best of luck. If you make it big someday, remember the club." And they're handshake deals and maybe it's 5,000, maybe it's 50,000, maybe it's 100,000. Um, but it's generally structured as like, just want to support you, best of luck. They may have some tie into a percentage of future earnings. Like Harry Higgs is one of our brand ambassadors, and I know he raised funds from members at his club in Dallas. And I think his only obligation to them was, if you make it, then pay us back, but also, pay it forward and help others. And I think he's able to do that as an ambassador with Carry. The other flavor of ice cream that I alluded to is you have a few entities that are out there that um, they'll go out and find pros, or they'll go to the best teaching pros in the country and they'll say, who is your most talented stick that has a real financial need? And they'll stake them to something, $100,000, maybe more, a couple $100,000, but they'll often say, okay, in exchange for these funds, we're going to take 50, 60% of your earnings for the next 10 years, or we'll take 35% of your earnings in perpetuity. To me, like, that's just not a business model that I want to be part of.
Right.
To me, that feels unsavory at best, perhaps worse. But so our contract with these golfers is for 4 years through 2027.
And suppose one of them strikes lightning and wins the FedEx Cup in the fourth
Yeah.
year. So is there a limit on the payout, the share, or?
No. Interestingly, the because of some recent, not rulings, but disclosures or announcements from the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, it was my original counsel's assessment that putting any kind of repayment cap on it opens our model into to be interpreted as a loan, and it's definitely not a loan, right? If it's presumed to be a loan, then we need a lending license, and we need a lending license in every state,
Interesting.
which would be cost prohibitive. With the idea being, if I put a 5x repayment cap on what you got or what you received, and you pay back that amount um, in the second year of a 4-year deal because you were mandated to a certain percentage. Well, now you're paying back something in year two, which could have been paid back over a couple more years. So from like a time value of money standpoint and an early repayment standpoint, it almost acts as a penalty on the golfer if they have a great second or third year.
Yeah.
So, anyways, the idea was let's stay away from any repayment caps that could have us potentially be interpreted as a lender or that we are issuing loans. We make it very clear in our contracts with the golfers. This is not a credit facility. It's not a debt obligation. You're not going to find it on your credit report. If you never make it to the top tours or you never play in these tournaments where the purse is 1.5 million or greater, then you'll never repay a penny. If you do, then you will. And in the scenario you outlined, if someone was to strike lightning and win the FedEx Cup, then they would pay back substantial amount of substantial multiple of what they received. And my only hope in that scenario is um, that we do it the right way, and that players would be of the mindset that, hey, I may not have gotten to this point without the support. And it's something that I'll tell you that, like, you think about the realities of that scenario. It's something that's cost me a lot of sleepless nights trying to find where's the right equitable balance on both sides. Um, in what would be our process in an event like that. Um, and how we could hopefully, leverage that experience as a way to get more funding for more golfers without being seen as taking advantage of athletes. But it's an interesting scenario. I'll tell you, I do think that this idea of investing in people beyond just golfers or athletes, I think that's going to become very mainstream, and for no other reason. I mean, you look at the debt loads of your average 25 to 40-year-old now, whether it's student loans or mortgages. I just don't think these debt loads are sustainable. And even, for instance, in a previous walk of life, I was working at Goldman Sachs, and I would talk to these younger analysts that were straight out of phenomenal schools. I mean, brilliant, hardworking, and they were probably making low six figures, which at 22, if you were going to tell me I was making $100,000 or maybe more with a bonus, I mean, I would have been
Yeah.
rich in every sense of the word, right? But I would talk to some of these analysts, and they were a lot of them were cash poor because they're analysts at Goldman Sachs, which means they work long days and they got to be close to the building, so they're paying a lot of money in rent, whether it's downtown Manhattan or Chicago or San Francisco. And I think there's going to come a day where if you can look at someone's academic and professional background as a bit of a validator of their credit history or their potential for success, like why should that 22 or 23-year-old go take out a credit card with a 25% interest rate when someone can say, hey, I'm going to invest in you and I want to help you out. I want to be a mentor. I want to be a connector. And when you make it 10, 15 years down the road, then we'll work something out. But I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And it's going to be interesting to see how those scenarios play out where people do have great success.
That's a really interesting take. Well, this has been great. I appreciate you taking the time to share all this with us. And I I had a list of things I wanted to ask you about, and I think you covered them all. It was
Well,
awesome.
I, I apologize for being long-winded.
Oh, that's
Hopefully you can
great.
tell. Hopefully you can tell it's definitely a passion for me. And I people often ask like, what does success look like for you, Donnie, with Carry? And I think depending on the audience, I might have a different answer. But I would say full disclosure, like I dream about the day when it's a couple years down the road and one of our players has a chance to make a putt that's going to win a tournament or otherwise change their life in a meaningful way and their family's lives in a meaningful way, and all of the people who have invested are either at the event or sitting around in the comfort of their own home or a pub somewhere, and they're like, shit, Kristen just made a putt, or someone just made a putt, and there's that moment of euphoria, not, I mean, for the person for sure, but from a standpoint of like, I know them. I knew him or
I helped
her.
him get there.
I helped them get there, and there's just like this natural relation of being part of someone's success. And then yeah, maybe a few minutes later, after kind of the immediacy of the excitement has worn off, maybe it is, oh wow, and I also get a small percentage of that. I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, or
Yeah,
invest in more golfers. To me, if and when that scenario plays out, it's going to be a really cool experience, and look forward to that day coming, but kind of enjoying the journey until we get there.
it's kind of like getting to be inside the ropes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. And
It was a part of.
hopefully with our community portal, which we're still kind of improving upon that, but hopefully you've been able to go in and see some of the updates the players send and
Right.
little things they're working on in their game week to week. Um, I always enjoy kind of reading about the courses and how some of them, the saying horses for courses is very real, and how some of them stand behind 18 different tee boxes and say, yeah, this course sets up really well for my game, or others say this isn't my course and I got to figure out a way to get around and get the ball in the hole, right? So um, yeah, it's been fun. I certainly appreciate the chance to share the story and the not only what we're doing but how we got here, and my 2 cents on what the future of carry as well as investing in people might look like.
Well, that's awesome, and we're going to keep getting the word out in support of you and having fun with being a part of it. And now you got to remember though, you owe me a game.
I do owe you a
You
game,
owe
and
me a game,
I,
and
I would love to explain that game right here, but it might just really
might
confuse some
take too
people. So
long.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll save it. There's some interesting offline developments that I'll share with you regarding our family game. But yeah, of
Okay. All right. Well, I'm counting on you. So once
course,
again, I really appreciate your time. This has been fun, and we'll keep getting the word out there.
Tom, pleasure. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking soon.
Okay. Thanks.
Have a good one.